Last week, Thursday, marked the 76th anniversary of the ANC Youth League, which some asking if there was anything to celebrate, really, as the organization is still without an elected leadership and has mounting financial problems. Now, former task team member Rebone Tau joins us to give us an insider's view of the challenges facing the league. Rebone, good evening, and thank you very much for your time tonight. Track for me the degeneration of the ANC Youth League in your own view. When does it start?
Good evening, Tau, and good evening to the viewers. As you are aware, I've just recently published my book, written The Rise and Fall of the ANC Youth League. Now, in the book, one of the things that we look at is the formation of the ANC Youth League in 1944, going to ANCYL. But based on your question, you remember that around 2004-2005, there was then internal politics or battles within the ANC when the then Deputy President of the Republic was recalled from being the Deputy President of the Republic, Jacob Zuma. Now this is now around 2004-2005, building up to Polokwane, the watershed conference of the ANC. So now you start to have a youth league that really now starts to be too factional and taking sides of factional battles in the ANC politics. You've got the likes of Rebone Tau, who was the then deputy president, to Fikile Mbalula, who was the president of the youth league, being suspended for having a different view, for supporting Thabo Mbeki and not supporting Zuma at the time.
Does the leadership then just ignore this degeneration? Do they note this degeneration, and what do they do about it?
I don't think that they know the degeneration, because now this is a hype, in terms of factional politics. Now there's contestation going to Nasrec. Then you go to the 2008 conference of the ANC Youth League, which then takes place in Mangaung. And after the top 5 results are announced, then some delegates feel that those results are not the correct ones, because the contestation at the time was between Julius Malema and Sakemo Mofokeng. Then that Congress had to be adjourned and then reconvened a few months later in Nasrec. But when you go to Nasrec, the ANC leadership then says, no, you will accept the outcomes of the top 5 results and you'll proceed and elect additional members at this conference. And delegates then decide to accept what the ANC leadership was saying at the time.
Now, would you say you would bring it down to the fact that the smaller voices within the party were not listened to?
Whether small, whether big, but in terms of the ANC, in my view, continues to take a factional battle when engaging on the issue of the youth league, but does not reflect on challenges of the youth league politically. You must remember that we are a political organization, so you'd expect the leadership to look at issues politically, but not along factional battles.
Now, talk to me then about this institution. Is it vital when we are talking South African politics?
The youth league remained relevant in South Africa. Firstly, you must remember that we've got a youthful population. So the youth league is supposed to be the voice of young people in South Africa. The twin task of the youth league, for example, it says that the youth league in its nature must champion the interest of young people, but also rally them behind the pen of the ANC. Now, the ANC, unfortunately, is not led by young people. So young people who are representing the youth league would always have a table at in a form of having a seat, in a form of being ex-official member in the ANC meetings, or provincial executive committee meetings, or regional executive committee meetings, or even at a branch level. Yeah. So the youth league is just that at this present moment, it's going through its challenges, but it remains relevant in society, because the youth league in its nature, it brings new ideas to the ANC. It's a body of opinion within the ANC.
Yeah. Well, there are some also still in the youth league who believe today that the ANC does not tolerate dissent, and they have literally rendered the ANC Youth League even weak when it stands amongst other political formations, for example, like the EFF, that the ANC Youth League won't be able to hold its own in battle, or in the battle of ideas, when up against that organization.
It is possible for the Youth League to have its own views, but as I said earlier on, in the longest time you have had the ANC finding itself also using the Youth League, different leaders within the ANC, in terms of factional battles. But the ANC Youth League can only find its voice when young people liberate themselves and are not used as pawn by some ANC leaders for factional battles. As we always know that when you go to an ANC conference, the Youth League is seen as a province and it's got its own delegates and it will pronounce it on its own candidate. Now you go back to 1944 when the Youth League was formed and how Moroka was elected as the president of the ANC. The Youth League goes to Moroka with a program of action and say to him, we will only support you for the position of president if you support our program of action. Then Moroka says, it's fine, I'll support your program of action. And that's how he's supported by the Youth League and he emerges later. But over the years, the Youth League, when it goes to conference of the ANC, it does not go to the ANC leaders when it lobbies to say, we've got a program of action that speaks to young people, that speaks to challenges of this country, but you find the Youth League that will just be in pockets of certain leaders of the ANC, and is what has made the ANC Youth League weak and not be seen to be relevant in society. Most young people outside of the Youth League politics don't even know who was the last president, don't even know what the Youth League stands for, because you have a Youth League that does not speak to challenges that are facing young people in society, but is more inward-looking in its approach.
Are we not just holding on to this romanticized view of a youth league that is volatile, that has a program of action, that is able to galvanize even within the organization, and maybe those politics just no longer exist and are no longer relevant to the young people?
You can never say the Youth League is not relevant to young people. The Youth League, for it to be formed, it was for it to drive the agenda of young people, for it to bring militancy, for it to be a mass organization that is based at community level. Because in 1943, 1944, before the Youth League was formed, those that formed it were of the view that the ANC is an elite organization and they need to transform the ANC and make sure that the ANC becomes a mass organization. You go to ANCYL, for an example. Before ANCYL, you've got the 1952 Defiance Campaign. That was because of the life that the Youth League was giving to the ANC. Yeah. You go to ANCYL again.
Granted, Rebone, I'm not disputing. I'm saying that is
that is the
romanticized view of the Youth League that we are holding on to. But young people today are really not interested in that. They are seeing the elders who themselves are not willing to evolve this ANC Youth League or even revive it. In fact, they are satisfied right now with the dysfunction in the Youth League. They want to keep it there. And young people are more interested now in getting into politics for career purposes, tenders and whatnot and whatnot.
You know why I'm taking you back to history? Is to show you the powerful role that the ANC Youth League has been always playing in the ANC politics. We can't then start to say we want to create our own Youth League when we know that the role of the Youth League has always been bringing life. Now, post-1994, whether young, whether old, you've got a lot of people that started joining the ANC for different reasons. Some, yes, they want to serve the people, make a difference, and yes, some have joined the ANC because they want a better life for themselves and not understanding that this organization, in its nature, is an organization that must represent the views of the people, be the voice of the people, and make sure that people live a better life. But once we want to say there is no place for the youth in society, when we've got a youthful population, then we are losing it, because in its nature, our country is mainly young people at this present moment.
Would it be possible then to rebuild this dysfunctional institution over just one conference and electing leaders and putting them in place? Is that all it will take?
Firstly, on Thursday last week, right, it was the 76th anniversary of the Youth League. Let's also remember that you had young people across the country in different provinces, even some much truly house, to say, give back our Youth League as young people. This is our organization. Secondly, you can rebuild the Youth League, but yes, it is a process which we can't say in the next conference all will be well. But is the process going to that conference that will determine the outcomes of the Congress, then that will determine what kind of leadership that will be there to make sure that they understand that their role is to serve the interest of the people of South Africa, but not there just to be deployed, whether as members of parliament or be deployed as councillors, but forgetting what is their role in society, what they need to make sure that they achieve by championing interest of young people outside of the ANC, by the way, because a youth league is not a youth league of only ANC members, but it's a youth league that champions interest of young people. We've got a multi-class youth society. They need to understand that the incoming leadership, but the process going to that conference, it will determine what kind of leadership that we have. In 2015, for an example, you go to a congress where the leadership of the ANC was presiding over that congress, a congress where there was no elections, but there was nomination, people accepted the nomination, and then they did not go to ballot, and then the congress was closed, it's the first thing since the unbanning of the ANC in 1990, where you go to a Congress of the Youth League where there is no ballot. That shows us that what went wrong, and that's why then you had a leadership which was not able to rise to the occasion, which was not able to take its rightful position in society.
Now, the leadership of the Youth League itself in recent times has been associated with corruption and scandals. And this is, of course, something that we are dealing with in society broadly and within the ANC broadly as the mother body organization. How are young people going to divorce themselves from that reputation?
Besides, when we talk about scandal and corruption, the only story that I know of, which was in the news, and the former president of the ANC, Colin Maine, never disputed, was that he was bought a house by the Guptas. But outside of that, I'm still to find of young people who have been implicated in corruption, who are in structures of the ANC Youth League.
I'm talking here, that's the one that you've cited, but there are numerous others that are leaders, former leaders of the Youth League, also caught up in corruption. They are older now and in other departments.
Let's not confuse the two. Currently, we're speaking about members of the Youth League. And yes, there are former leaders of the Youth League who, even at this present moment, the PPE saga, for example, in Gauteng, you've got Comrade Pandile Masuku, you've got Comrade Loiso, you've got Comrade Kusele. Yes, all of them are former leaders. So I want us to separate the two. But in terms of those who are leading structures of the Youth League, those who are members of the Youth League, no one has been implicated in corruption. I stand to be corrected if I've missed it.
Talk to me then about the quality of the comrade that will emerge out of the ANC Youth League today, considering, of course, there's another young formation called the Economic Freedom Fighters that is contesting in that space of the minds of young people.
In my view, where we are, we need to have an honest and frank discussion internally, politically, for us to produce a caliber of cadres who are revolutionaries, who are not Louis Vuitton, Gucci boys or Gucci girls, but who know that they are there to serve the people, who are not there to accumulate wealth and be loved by certain leaders of the ANC, but who are going to represent young people or the people of South Africa. People who will not say, I'm a member of the ANC before I'm a South African, because I've got a problem with that notion. You are first born a South African. When you are born, your parents receive a birth certificate that says, Thabo Luli is a South African, right? Mm-hmm. Then you later decide whether you want to join politics, and then you decide which political party you can identify yourself. So we need young people who will also understand that being a South African is very important. Protecting all the institutions in South Africa, whether parliament, the judiciary, whether the different departments, that it is important and that South Africans come first. We must never think that the ANC is bigger than South Africa or the South Africans.